Hello everyone, my name is Eloise Sweetman and with me is my friend and colleague Kris Dittel. We're back with the second season of I Hope This Message Finds You Well, a podcast on curating, where we talk to curators about their approach to curating, how they began and what they love about the profession. Today's episode is with the three core members of Sarmad, Alireza Abbasy, Golnar Abbasi and Arvand Pourabbasi.
Sarmad is an independent non-profit interdisciplinary platform for research, publishing, collective thinking and education in the fields of art, architecture and design. Based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, Sarmad has been evolving since its foundation in 2012. It started as a magazine for experimental photography and evolved into a platform working across different disciplines from photography, visual arts and architecture to writing, performance art and film.
So my name is Golnar. I have a background in architecture and I work as part of Sarmad. I also teach in film decoding. I also am part of a collective called WorkNote with Arvand.
This is Arvand. I have background in architecture too. I'm part of Sarmad and WorkNote with Golnar. And I do teach in film decoding too, spatial design and autonomous practice. And I've been around Rotterdam for not that long, 5 years, which is interesting because we had a collective called Netherlands Cinema, which it's ended by beginning of pandemic.
So I'm Alireza, or Ali. In terms of background, I have a background in engineering and fine arts. Apart from Sarmad, I think I identify as a writer, an artist a visual artist who tries to do things that are not so visual.
We were also wondering if you could tell a few words about Sarmad and how you started or what led you to start this platform.
Well, Sarmad, we started in 2012. Golnar and me. And then later on, Arvand joined us. Back then, we're very much into photography/image making. So it basically started as a magazine for experimental or alternative image making. So weird ways of making images other than working with a manufactured camera. And then slowly over time, we made a couple of books. So we got into publishing and then we started doing these public events. So slowly it grew into more of a platform that does different things and is, I would say, beyond that initial definition for the image. We could still say that we are working on image, but it's a much broader definition, I guess.
No, I just want to kind of add that we started the collective when we were both in Iran back then. But you were not in Iran.
I was in Amsterdam, you were in Iran, and then I came back to Iran.
And then I came to the Netherlands, and then you went back to, anyway. Yeah. But then that has been, and then Arvand was in Iran, he moved here. We moved around quite a bit. Ali used to live in Berlin for a bit. Yeah. And then throughout this time, despite all this moving, this somehow changed with, the way that our lives was changing maybe. And then now that I hear you talk about it as a platform, I realize we don't have a space. We just have studio spaces. So it also, it's also about how that, maybe it's not the traditional way that you would think of a platform. It doesn't really work that way.
I was wondering if you could tell about how these other topics then evolved, starting from you were coming from the politics of the image and representation and image making. How do then these other topics that you expanded on or extended the platform it emerged. I'm curious how they came about, or what are they?
I think that when we started hosting public events, which was when we started inviting people to give talks based on the practice or the research, was when it became a different way to think about image making for us. Like, instead of working with people who were producing images or like maybe had a more artistic practice. So then that was the start of kind of expanding this in terms of how we understand image and the different ways that could be thought about. So we were thinking about archives and the space of the radio also as a form of image making, things like that, which then influenced, I think then was a kind of a moment where this moment of expansion was also a space where we started becoming or like acknowledging all these different interests that we would have had because of the work that we're doing in Sarmad or also apart. And then kind of every time these things were brought back to Sarmad. So for instance, with Ali, fiction writing, like Ali was thinking a lot about image making without the visual image. And so writing became a really important part of it, which is now also part of Sarmad. And maybe with Arvand also thinking about space and architecture, which kind of became part of Sarmad. I think it happens in a lot of the intersections of these things. I think there's something about when you start something and you're like, this is what this is about. And then as you move on, you realize that maybe it's about all these other things or things just change. And if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. But this is the first time we're actually talking to a collective, and then also a collective with such a kind of varied practice that your projects manifest in so many different ways, and also not really having a platform in the sense of physical platform. I guess my question would go back to, in some way, I think you still consider yourself a curator or curator of this platform. I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about that, like how do you see your platform within the realm of curating, or say expanding or working with that notion of curating?
I can say something really brief. I think that we arrived to this at this table with different identifying as a curator or not in different degrees, maybe also individually differently. So when you invited us, I was like, okay, we in no way we are curators. But then I think since then we also discussed like, what does that mean to do that, and like the relations between that and editorial work.
Yeah, no, I mean, like for me, this is always the question of what is curatorial job, what does curating mean, and like how does it work? It's like, I mean, for me, the definition is more like how you redistribute the resources you have and how make them basically public and visible. And I think, like in case of like Sarmad, we, like for instance, one really interesting point is from 5 books which is printed out from Sarmad, 4 of them came out of OpenCall, right? And that's like in terms of book and publishing and making literally physical book, that was one of the like most interesting curatorial part of Sarmad for a long time, since the beginning till now. Or like with the fiction writing, again, it's somehow open calls or open invitation for people to send their essays, and then the club works itself. So that's again other form of curating, and so on and so forth with the other project within Sarmad. And I think how we were thinking in general about curating, even show, it was more about creating circumstances that we can redistribute the sources we have equally, and at the same time with some but among the people that we feel like comfortable with, I mean, in some sense.
I think like in terms of being a curator, if somebody invites me somewhere as a curator, like you're invited as a curator, I would say I'm not a curator. But when I think about what we're doing in Sarmad, that's basically curating, you know. So I think, you know, like from my perspective, I'm like we in Sarmad we haven't really curated exhibitions. We've done many different projects, publishing, like a writing club, podcasts, essays, you know, different things over time. But we didn't curate exhibitions. And also I think, you know, this like not having an exhibition space is kind of, I don't know if it's if I can say like that's a conscious decision, that's what we decided to do, but it's kind of like it happened for us so naturally that we've been working for these years and we don't have an exhibition space, and we kind of, like me personally, I don't really feel the need, because then it really changes the whole dynamic of this, you know, I call it a platform, Sarmad. Then it will change everything, you know. When you have the space, when you have the rent, when you start doing the exhibitions, actually, like, you know, spending resources on production, and, you know, so many people, you know better than me, so many people are involved in an exhibition, you know. So it's kind of, I don't mean that you have to become an institution, but you kind of move in that direction of, you know, thinking in a more institutional, structured way about, you know, about everything basically. But now we really have the freedom to have these projects because there's no physical space involved, and because a lot of the projects, apart from publishing, we don't really have production budgets, you know. It really cuts the cost for us. And we can go on with much lower resources, and I think the freedom really works for me, at least.
And then also you are developing relationships with other platforms or institutions to host some of your projects, right?
Yes.
So it's also, you could imagine, like, developing those relationships can also expand to different audiences. But do you see Neverland Cinema part of Sarmad, or is it a separate project? Because you do have many different platforms, and like whether they're physical or were physical, and then time-based, or and then also with Work Not as a collective. Like, could you maybe talk about how you navigate all, like, because it's very rich, every aspect is very rich, and like, to me it also is very interesting in terms of, because each part of what these projects or platforms or collectives are doing is the curatorial. But how do you navigate? Because I imagine that at some points they do interweave or buffet against each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they make you overwork.
Oh, yeah. So that's also true. The labor.
Yes.
I think that, I mean, definitely there are different ways that at least I talk about it. Like, every time someone wants to introduce me, or like every time we do something and then someone wants to promote it, they like tag the wrong collective, or they tag the wrong people, and they don't know the difference, because like it's really like the overlaps are so many, and in a way it also kind of maybe starts to lose sense sometimes. But then there is a way that these overlaps become meaningful, and there's also a way that it really doesn't matter anymore. In a way, I think there is a way to negotiate how, for example, for a funding body, or to negotiate with different forums with different audiences or different professionals. There is a way that these definitions of, like, okay, this is Sarmad, this is Worknot, this is Golnar, this is Ali, this it's useful because there is a way that they're specific in their own way, which means that it really feels like you have many hands, which is kind of, I mean, it does result in the overworking. Like you're smiling. It does result in that overwork, but it also means that I think there's a way to get away from the way that you are kind of expected to introduce yourself as like one thing or these two things, or I do this, I'm part of this, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which is confusing a lot of times. Like people don't know how to refer to you. They're like, but do you also work there? But do you also do this? So that's something else. Which I kind of enjoy. It's kind of funny. Someone tagged us last year for something, and then they tagged you, like Ali and Arvand instead of each other, and also Sarmad and Worknot instead of each other. And I had to explain all of this. And I was like, actually, I don't know. It's just we wear many hats.
Yeah.
But I think I'm interested in how there is a way to work that is not collective, maybe in the way that like we were talking about before, like so Sarmad is about this, like this is what we're focusing on. But there is something in that confusion that I kind of enjoy, or like this kind of collectivity, like you share space with some people and you share this kind of research or interest with some people. Yeah, I think it creates a lot of just like in between.
Weirdly, sometimes when, I don't know why we do that, but sometimes we do like project and like sign it Sarmad times Worknot. They're like, but why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? So recently we wanted to just seduce ourselves, and we used okay, this is a collection of what we say, like
joining of attitudes.
Yeah, it's a joining of attitudes.
Yeah, because also with the show, is it fictionalizing, fictioning comfort, which is curated by Worknot, but then Sarmad is as a platform is one of the contributors. So it's also interesting, because you were just talking before about how in fact what you're doing is like within the curatorial or curating, and then so it's also like sort of curating.
Yeah.
But also like this particular exhibition is also involving a lot of collaborative projects as well. Like maybe is it too soon to already ask the question to talk about this exhibition, fictioning comfort, because this was also something that we found very interesting in terms of this show was happening during kind of like the height of the pandemic, and that also the exhibition, or were you seeing it as an exhibition actually? Yeah, so you were, and that also it was an exhibition that kind of went outside of itself. That's how I was sort of experiencing. It's kind of like inverting, and so the fact that you had no physical sort of platform is also interesting to also then when you do have an exhibition space to then also that you can't have people inside it, also very interesting to then have to kind of turn it inside out. And maybe you want to talk about this exhibition a little bit.
Well, fiction and comfort started, we got commission assigned, whatever, called out in end of summer 2019.
Yes.
Yeah, for the curator, program makers or whatever we were called, from Showroom MAMA, and then we start communicating, and I started communicating with other program makers. Till February, everything was kind of still, made sense. It's like, yeah, sure, oh, nice. And then there was the opening of first show of this collection they had. They invited 4 different program maker, which they were calling it pool.
To curate 4 different shows throughout the year.
Yeah, every show takes 3 months or something. And then, yeah, it was around February, I guess. So they started like producing the first show. They had the opening and it was lockdown.
Yeah.
And then, so everything started to become a little bit strange, to even like thinking about having show, thinking about like how to ask people to work in such a time, and how to even like, it's because it was like quite a heavy baggage of responsibility. Not only like about like curating show, putting the show together and producing things, managing the money, like sending application for fund. No, but also it was about like responsibility towards like health of like audience and artists and so on and so forth. So it was quite interesting, I would say. And then like we had a lot of like conversation back and forth with Natalie about like how like everything works, and at the same time we were teaching also at Willem de Kooning, so there was also kind of mess of like how to teach now remotely, how you can and that's also another form of curating, like to engage people. Now they are bored in their bedroom, and like how you can engage them. It was terrible. Let's say, be honest. And then before, like at the beginning, when we got assigned, we started thinking of like, because before that we were me and Golnar, like a year before that we started like working on the idea, like working on the topic of burnout and exhaustion. And this was continuation of that. And at the same time, with Sarmad, we had this discussion about home, even before the like it was in January. We had the discussion about home, how home works, and it was also about like a condition of housing and so on and so forth. So everything sort of like hand in hand, and pandemic came and home like changed its meaning and so on and so forth. And then when we were talking, we were like, okay, if we have like this opportunity to curate something, we need to find ourselves like in a position that we can make relationship with the people in the show, like participants. And we're like, okay, there should be friends and kins, the ones we really want to work with. And I think that was the kind of beginning how we started the fiction comfort.
So yeah, the lockdown happened and we had talked to the artists and everybody had some ideas what to do. And then the show before us closed down, as Arvand was saying. And then everybody was hopeful at that time that it's going to open by July. It's going to be fine. And I think there was a moment, and that meant that there is a budget that is for a physical show, and everybody's planning to do works that will be installed in the space in certain ways. And there was a moment where in one of these press conferences in the Netherlands, it was clear that that's not going to happen. So then it was a discussion of, do we postpone this show together with Showroom MAMA? Do we postpone this? Or do we think of a way to do this? And for us, it was important because we felt really responsible for the artists that we had already talked to. Mm-hmm. And like we had an open call with Sarmad, how are they going out? And people had sent their works. And it felt important to do. It felt that, doing this show was like, if we have asked people to work, it feels really important to pay them for the work that they have been doing and they have been planning to do, especially during a pandemic, rather than feeling like, the kinds of ways that we would imagine a show to work is not going to be possible. And, the publicity that the kinds of publicity that we imagine for it to have is not going to happen, things like that. So then we had to think of a way that redistribution of resources that Arvand was talking about, it became really one of the most important structuring elements of the show in the end. And so then we had to talk to everybody and be like, let's do an online show, and then we make sure that everybody's paid the same amount, and we make sure that it was really interesting, all these discussions about, for example, if someone doesn't like agreeing with everybody, like all the parties involved, that if someone for whatever reason cannot manage to do the work that they said they would do, like one of the artists, they still get paid, you know, and kind of agreeing on all of these things in advance, like adjusting all these things to something that no one had experienced before. So then there was a decision to do an online show, and then everybody did their works for this online show. Everybody had to readjust. So the video works were more easier to kind of think about their kind of online presence, or the installations that involved video works, like the work of Sarmad, Maafi, that had to be rethought in terms of an online. And
work of Ali completely changed from it was completely different project, and it turned to another wonderful project.
Another wonderful project. Actually, two projects by Ali.
So in some point we ended up like having like all the artists, and they had two works at the exhibition, so it was physical.
But no, wait.
Two versions.
Wait. So we went for an online show, and then they started opening up spaces in the Netherlands. So then we were asked to have something in the space of the gallery that now has to be open, and so it didn't make sense for the gallery to have an online show when the museums and institutions are open, and then have their space be empty and closed down, which was like a month before the opening. It was very stressful. But then we kind of had to think of a way to also have something in the space of the showroom, which meant that we made the decision not to bring in everybody, because everybody had to register and reserve in advance, things like that, and the space is pretty small. So then we just use the windows, because Showroom MAMA has it's like a shop space. So then we just decided to use the windows, the displays, so that people can view the works from the outside, and they're on almost all the time, and the opening is just outside because there's nothing to see inside, other than one of the works that there was like a bookshop, so you had to go inside. So then it became about producing two things, two shows at the same time. And then no one could travel of the artists, so other than maybe two people, we had to install everything ourselves and kind of making sure that there's something in the space of the gallery.
Well, I think it's also really interesting, because like when we started like developing the online platform, actually, I still like connect more to the online platform as a show to the physical one, even though that was really like interesting. But the online platform like worked completely different in terms of like exhibition, and it was a place that you could spend time. I mean, from my point of view, because there were so many things to look at and not get distracted so easy. So that was actually also interesting. But I just want to like add something to what you said. So it was couple of like 2.5 months before the opening date of exhibition and launch of website, of course, that we started like rethinking like what could be what are we doing as curator, program maker, or whatever. And I was cycling around Kralingen both the lake, around the Kralingen bus and around the lake, and I came home. I mean, our place is close by that, and I told Golnar, why we don't do like projects like about bike messenger. And that kind of and then yeah, it's cool. I watched some videos about like bike messengers in New York, in Berlin, here and there. And then but we have this great friend, Tomi Hilsee, that we're always like talking about these, because they have done like bike messengering career job as like professional job, even though they're artist, architect, maker, researcher, or whatever, I don't know. And then we started actually like together, like thinking of so how this could work. And then we were like, okay, if we have like now in the show we have around like 6-7 people, and then all of these people, they are in collaboration with other people, because in somehow we were so lucky to receive a lot of money, from all of these generous public money sender institutions. So we sent like application, and we didn't hesitate to send out for more resources, because it was a difficult time in some sense. So we were lucky from that point, and we told all the artists that if you want, you can expand your collaboration, and then in the budget of show we can actually pay these people like you're collaborating with.
Can I just add a detail to this? This was an interesting moment, because we were like, okay, we need, if we are doing this job during a pandemic and everybody's doing making 2 works and stuff, we need a lot of funding. So we sent out frantically a lot of applications together with the gallery. And then it was really hard to argue, according to the national regulations, if we wanted to pay the artists more than the national thing. It would have been hard for them to argue that. But then we really wanted to pay people more than that minimum thing. Like, it was very clear that everybody's going through a lot, and we can't meet even to discuss their works and stuff. So anyway, so then it became a way to do that was to kind of ask everybody to work, like if they were to also kind of do like another, maybe it's not a curatorial step, but if the could we frame this so that the collaborators are also part of, so every artwork is like a little collective bubble, and then they could argue that okay, there's more money, there's more artist fee because of that reason, and that became part of these like our correspondence with the funding bodies. That was very specific to the pandemic. That the gallery was like, okay, because of pandemic, this is what's happening, and this is like a new way. This is a way for us to do this, to distribute the budget. Anyway, I talked too long.
No. So based on that, we saw like, okay, like from these 6-7 artists, they collaborated with like so many other people, which creates like quite a big, like circle around the show. Like it's a big, it turned to the community kind of thing. We were like, okay, as curatorial job, why don't we, I mean, it's also a little bit cheesy the way I'm going to say it, but why don't we like take this work and the thing we want to distribute and talk about to the people to see how it works?
The Bike Messenger as an exhibition space and also as a device to like take the work to the audience, to me is really really interesting, and it kind of like, I remember when I heard it because Big van der Pol told me about it, and they kind of described to me how it happened, and I was thinking at how we don't see these sorts of exhibitions not anymore, but like at one point, like I think Raimundas Malašauskas was doing a hit, like this show that were only on a carpet, or like a show that was just in the mind, and this Bike Messenger is like, it's like it makes so much sense. Like, of course, it's also like within a certain parameter, but then it can go pretty far, and I think like for me this is also what exhibition and curating's where it becomes very exciting, I think, because it doesn't need to be locked within the walls of a exhibition space.
I was wondering, maybe this is a little elliptical introduction to another project, but last week we spoke to Sarah Giannini, who is a curator at Ifakon Dance, and she has a background in semiotics, and we talked about the question of image and language. That's also really important to me, the way I kind of see that relationship between text and the visual realm, say. And I think that's also very present in Sarmad, like coming from the very beginnings of the magazine, but also now comes the ellipsis. I was very interested in the writing club that you have, the fiction writing club. So I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about that and how did that come about?
All eyes turn to you.
Yeah, I think, I personally really like this project. And I think it kind of also, it explains certain things about Sarmad and what we're doing kind of, or what we try to do. Actually, the idea, I had been thinking about what you say, text and image and language, like verbal imagery, until actually for the show, the show that we were talking about. I first wanted to do this video and a performance and stuff, and the performance had this whole set and production, and then it got the show was like, we're not sure if it's happening or not, if it's online or offline, and it was a very hard time for everybody, including me. And like, okay, and it's like fiction and comfort. So I was like, okay, so for one of the works, I just write some fiction. I just write some stories. And it's just, the main aim is just comfort. For me, it was like, the way I was thinking about it is like, these stories come out of exhaustion. And they're like an attempt for reaching comfort. So that's basically where it started for me. And then I was like, this year, I thought, maybe we could do something with other people. Because I knew that there are, maybe not a lot, but there are some visual artists who write and who write fiction. There are a lot of people who write, theory and, essays and like non-fiction. Although the distinction is also a little bit tricky.
It's true.
But I knew that, some people practice it, but people are kind of a little bit, like in general, they're kind of shy of introducing it as part of their visual arts practice. They're like, okay, so I have this visual art practice, I do some writing fiction on the side, for some people. I was like, okay, what if we argue that they're basically the same thing? If you go to all those, like visual culture theories, talking about like different dimensions of image, like verbal imagery, perceptual imagery, mental images, stuff that you see in your dreams, images that come from other senses. So I was like, okay, if we assume that theory is correct, then we could argue that writing, especially writing fiction, could be seen as a visual art practice. So we're like, okay, let's start a community where visual artists can write fiction. Actually, one other thing that was really interesting and important for me was that, if you write and you're not a writer, if you're not a professional writer, if you're not a literary writer, it's really hard to get your writing out there, Like these competitions and all these communities and stuff. As an artist who practices writing, entering those serious writing communities can be really difficult, and you get really judged based on your language, based on what you're doing with this, with that. And like, actually a lot of these artists that we knew, English is not their mother language, So for them, writing is completely serving another function compared to a literary write. So we're like, okay, let's just have a community for that. And we also wanted to, I personally wanted to keep ourselves out of it kind of as much as we could. So like kind of maybe curating in an invisible way, So we're like, okay, this is a club, So we invited some people, and we said, if you like to join, you can tell us who you want to invite, and we send an invitation. So we thought that's how it can grow. Now we're like, okay, it works in rounds. You send your stories, we just put them together, we send them to the members, and they vote for the story that they like. And everybody has 2 votes, because 1 vote could be difficult. Like, what is the best story? It's a little bit weird. Like, you have 2 votes. So it's like, a community that is basically, I think the main intention is to encourage visual artists to practice fiction writing and not be shy of seeing this practice as an art practice, or particularly as a visual art practice.
One of the things I really like about that you wrote in the description of the writing club is that it's an introverted system or something, or the process is very introverted. You don't have to talk to anybody, you don't have to perform. You just receive things, and then you just enjoy reading them maybe, and then you just choose the ones you like. You don't have to. Also, I think, I just really like how that was formulated or articulated. That, I mean, in continuation of thinking of the Bike Messenger, which happened because of the pandemic. The pandemic was a trigger to think about how to do it in this way. Writing club doesn't have to be in that way. And I mean, now we can have gatherings of 8 people but it becomes something different, like the relation that you have with other people who produce things, or how that space where things could happen in, or like when the space that could be generative doesn't necessarily imply dressing up and like performing and like being articulate.
Like no small talk. I was like, because even with the Bike Messenger, the Bike Messenger shows up at your doorstep. You have to still open the door and communicate and this and that, So it's like, it turns into an event. Oh, this guy's coming at 8, It's 8:10, he's not here, And we have to perform. And, everything is digital. We send you the stories, you read them, you vote, no small talk, no nothing. And then later on we see if we like to have some gatherings, either online or offline in real life. But for now, it's just, you just write and you share it with other people.
I mean, maybe something to be said is that, so there's the voting system, and then the story that gets like a little prize.
I guess we have to call it a prize. That's the word.
And then all the stories that are sent can be seen on the website of Sarmad. So like everything is there in a PDF. And then there's like the publication to come later, which includes the one that won and the ones that we were like, but this is also really good, but this didn't win. So then different ways of, and then on Instagram, we're already publishing some of the stories. So different ways of just publishing and then republishing these things again.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like in listening to all the different projects, that it sounds also to me that like how these projects come into the world and how people are invited, and you were talking about in terms of the fee and also like kind of caring for the participants is like really a big aspect of everything that you're doing. And do you really involve each participant depending on the project? But because it's like the way each project comes into the world, it's like, you may be the core of each platform or project, but then how the different participants come in, it sounds to me like they really have a say in how the project might run. Is that true, or is that am I understanding you correctly? Like with what you were saying with Work Not, for example, in terms of if somebody cannot produce, they will still get paid. Was that was something that you decided and then told the participants, or was it a collective decision with the whole group? Or
I mean, this was something that we discussed. We discussed because everybody was really struggling. So we were like, okay, if there is the funding, then we should make sure that And you know, this is maybe the most conventionally curatorial example, fiction and comfort. And then it means that in that case, like there is a certain kind of access to the budget, but also not really. So then that happens. The access to the budget happens through that negotiation. So that was something that we decided among ourselves, and then we discussed with Showroom if they would kind of agree with that, and kind of they were happy to do it. So then we talked about that with the artists. But I think, in terms of the main question that you asked, I think a part of all of these things, the way that I think about all these different things, is that a major part of these works is administrational work, which also includes logistical works, which is also something that is not so shiny to talk about, you know, but then it's the reality of it is that's really like working with all these Excel sheets and taking minutes and notes and having these meetings is really the work, which is the work of making space in a way, or making all these different forms of spaces or different forms of connections and relations between people and institutions and budgets and spaces and practices, and that might even be very introverted. So it's not a really direct answer to what you ask, but that's the way that I think about it, that a lot of this work is that kind of work. And then thinking about maybe being concerned with, which also kind of relates to Sarmad not having a space, but it becomes about making space in all these different ways, you know. I think that being a platform or being a freelance curator, there is and then especially discussing this work as a kind of space making, you know, as we discussed before, there's always that, especially working with larger institutions, there are all these different levels of kind of labor and positions that people occupy, and there's a lot of enclosures that you have to move through. Like there's an institution and you're not a part of that institution, so then there's a lot of internal things that you also have to kind of understand, even creating something. There's a lot of things that you wouldn't know, and you're on a different, you come to that shared work with an institution from a very different space. Like you are a freelance curator, for example, and then that institution has staff members, and then each of them are on whatever kind of contract that they are on, and they have their own, you know, internal hierarchies and the way that the dynamics of how work is done in any of them. And then there are of course artists, or like kind of by extension all these other freelance people who would be involved, and then production team and build up and all these things, you know, technicians. And I think that has been really, I think we went into this with like organizing the events in the beginning with Sarmad really kind of naively, like, okay, just we contact people in the institutions and then we do this, which made it really easy to do. It was also like, you know, one-time events for like 2 hours, 3 hours. That was really, it will be done and then gone. But I think through time, it's really interesting. There is a lot of things that I think we have faced in terms of expectations, or even people having paid time to discuss with you or negotiate things. Like even if you are willing to do that extra work and making sure that people are okay, even though technically it's not asked of you, you know, if you're going to do that kind of care work, in quotation marks, then there's still like all these other parties at the table that are not paid to do that, or are not interested to do that, or would refuse to do that, and technically do have the right to. And my sense is there's something about the fragmentation of an institution. It's about the, you know, institutions as a structure, as like a kind of structure, whatever size of whatever kind of access, there is a way that things are done. There is a mechanics that you arrive to. You don't have prior knowledge to. So then you would be in touch with people that are already stressed, and you have no idea. You're like, oh, I didn't even know that there was a deadline that I missed because no one told me, because the person that was supposed to do that had a day off, you know? So it's really, I think it has been kind of surprising for me to encounter that. And like, when we think about the art world and all the problematics of the art world and the attitudes that it kind of conditions and the ways that you have to relate to people so that you can be there and do your thing, there is a lot of things happening that condition that in a more maybe fundamental level.
I think it really works. Like if we were two people, I think it would have been so much more difficult.
Yeah.
Being three makes it easier.
Yeah.
You know. And also, I mean, of course, when you're three, you have more hands.
Yes.
But it's also like, you know, perspectives. Like you have three perspectives. So like, you know, sometimes we like one of us has an idea and we're like, okay, let's meet and talk about this. And then when each of us say out loud what we think about it, like that initial idea completely changes, you know? Or like, I mean, it's formed in a different way, let's say. But about what is Sarmad, I have this problem. Like every few months, I'm like, what is this description? I have to change this.
Exactly.
And then I spend a few hours, I write some stuff, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Still not.
I totally relate.
That's not what we're doing, you know?
Yeah, I think our explanation has changed so many times, and like once we tried to make it really like practical, and like it really sucked at all the kind of energy out of what we were doing. It's like no, don't go in that direction. It's like, but it was also kind of nice to be like, okay, like, you know, like let the poetic and the kind of the in between, you know, do what it needs to do. If it becomes so practical and administrative, like it's kind of like you start to suffer and wilt like a flower or something. Yeah. That's the best description. how I feel with shimmer is like, yeah.
Can I add something to that? That also includes a shout out. I want to say that we had, for the first time, we had an intern this year. Shout out to Yusser Saleh. And I had a lot of conversations with her, and I'm sure we had also, when, especially in the previous studio, we're meeting a lot more in person, where we would have ideas and we were like, this is what we're going to do, and like it's very clear, obviously, and then she would be like, but isn't it this that you're doing? One of the first things that she said was like, why is it sarmadmagazine.com? You're not a magazine anymore. I had not thought about. I didn't think that it mattered. You know. So it was interesting to hear from her, to hear her feedback and be like. One time she was like, what did she say? She said something about, like, she was like, you guys have been in Rotterdam for so many years now, and I haven't heard about you, so I think you need to do better. Which was really nice. I was like, oh.
Okay.
Maybe we are very introverted. I don't know.
In the next episode, we interview Sophia Lemos, where we talk about the political, social, and spiritual aspects of her programming for the public.
If you have feedback, we'd love to receive your email at ihopethismessagefindsyouwell@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at ihopethismessage and find us on SoundCloud under the same handle. Our jingle was by the artist duo Momuno S, and our sound engineer is Nick Thomas.